Have you ever wondered what happens after death? Not the theories, but the real backstage. In the icy silence of the morgue, where the only witnesses are the ones who've already gone. And the ones who work there, the ones who prepare the bodies, do they always walk away untouched? This video is not fiction. It's not a dramatization. These are real accounts told by embalmers who, by choice or by curse, became guardians of what remains when the soul refuses to leave. Get ready for 5 first-person stories. Stories that go far beyond the flesh. Because sometimes, what ends up on the embalmer's table isn't ready to go just yet. You'll hear about a body that cries without life, makeup that never dries, a face that was never his, a corpse with the embalmer's name pulsing beneath its skin, and a restless presence marked by symbols that keep multiplying. But before you dive in, look around. Make sure you're really alone. Because if something in these stories feels familiar, if something echoes in a forgotten dream, or a chill you can't explain, you might have been chosen too. So like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell. Not just for me, it's just that if you leave in the middle of the story, they might come looking for you to finish it. Now take a deep breath and listen closely, because silence never comes alone. Story 1. Andrew's Whisper. My name is Dylan Mercer, and for over a decade, I worked as an embalmer at a quiet funeral home in rural Ohio. Silence was usually my ally. In it, I found focus, respect, and even a strange kind of peace. But one day, silence answered back. And since then, I've never been able to trust it again. It was early November. A low mist hung over the road when the funeral car arrived with an unidentified body. Young man, early 20s, car accident, no ID, no companions. According to the officer who brought him in, the body was found hours after the crash. Alone. There was nothing in the car. No sign of forced entry. He was just there, like he'd appeared out of nowhere. They gave him a temporary name, Andrew. Simple, generic, but I've never forgotten it. I unzipped the black bag like I'd done so many times before, but right away something was off. His skin was warm, not lukewarm, warm like a pillow after a long sleep. The room was cold. The chamber thermometer read 39 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius. Still, Andrew was sweating. I touched his wrist. No pulse, but my fingers didn't want to stay. Felt like something was still there. I started the cleansing. Every line of his face looked sculpted. Young. No visible trauma. The file said internal injuries. But from the outside, he just looked asleep. Until a tear slid down from his left eye. I froze. Watched the thin line run down his temple. Touched it through my glove. It wasn't condensation. It was warm and salty. I tried to push through. Continued the process. But as I positioned his body for the arterial procedure, the fingers on his right hand moved. Slowly, like they were trying to grip the sheet. My hand locked. My stomach turned. The radio, always playing soft jazz in the background, gave a sharp pop and went silent. The overhead light flickered. Silence became presence. I stopped, left the room, drank some water, went out to the parking lot, took a deep breath. I told myself, muscle reflex, post-mortem twitch. It happens. It happens. But not with that warmth. Not with that tear. That night I went home, but I didn't sleep. I had a dream, or maybe a message. I was driving down an empty road. Ahead, a car parked on the shoulder. I got in. On the passenger seat, Andrew, pale face, open eyes, and a faint, almost sad smile. You saw me, Dylan. Now, I see you too. I woke up with a tight chest. My bedroom window was fogged up, and on the glass, someone had written 3:33. The clock read 3:33 a.m. The next day, I returned to the funeral home, determined to double-check everything. But when I entered the cold chamber, Andrew's body was gone. I asked the director. He looked at me, puzzled. Andrew? Who's Andrew? We haven't received anyone by that name. I checked the digital logs. Nothing. On paper, a blank space. On the clipboard in the prep room, my name, scribbled in the corner. That's it. I thought I was losing my mind. Went home, and that's when things got worse. The doorbell rang every night, always at 3:33 a.m. The radio turned on by itself, playing 1950s jazz, the same song I was listening to while working on Andrew. Short words began to appear on the bathroom mirror. I'm here. Listen. See me. I decided to go to the spot where the body had been found. On the roadside, I found a small makeshift memorial. Wilted flowers, a wooden cross, and on the ground, a melted candle with the name, Mercer. My last name. I froze, snapped a photo, but when I looked at the screen, my reflection wasn't the same. It was smiling, just like Andrew in the dream. I reached out to a medium. I'm not usually a believer, but I was desperate. She welcomed me without asking anything, took my hand, closed her eyes, and said, "Someone's stuck, not by death, but by being forgotten. He wants you to remember, because you saw him when he passed. And now, he wants you to be his final memory." I went back home, and that night he came. Not in a dream. In the mirror, his reflection stood behind me, still, but with tears in his eyes. "You saw me. Now, set me free." I began writing everything down, dug through records, researched old accidents on that highway, and I found something. In 1984, a boy named Andrew Mercer, my name reversed, died in a crash on that same road. He was 11 years old. The car that hit him was never found. The only witness was a child in the back seat of another vehicle, never identified. Later, my mom told me that when I was 6, I stopped speaking for a week, right after a road trip. Now, I believe I saw Andrew die, that I was the last person to look him in the eyes. And somehow, he got trapped in that moment. And when I prepared him, I was staring into the past. Literally. Ever since I accepted that, the manifestations eased. But every now and then, the radio plays jazz. And in the mirror, sometimes, I see two reflections, mine and his, side by side, like brothers, separated by time. That was Andrew's story. Or maybe it was mine too. Story 2. The makeup that never dried. My name is Grace Mitchell. I'm a mortuary makeup artist. Or, as they like to call it around here, a funeral aesthetic preparation technician. It might sound morbid, but I used to love what I did, helping families see their loved ones at peace, even after the pain. It was a service of compassion, of dignity, until I met Natalie, or rather, until she followed me home. It was just another Monday in Milwaukee. Fall. Gray skies. The kind of day when the sun seems to avoid the city on purpose. I was called in to prepare a 27-year-old woman. Suicide. Gunshot wounds. Her face was intact, but her eyes were hollow. It wasn't my first case like this, but something about her froze me from the start. The report said Natalie J. No last name, no family visit. Her body had been found in a motel room, with a note beside her and the bathroom mirror covered with a black sheet. I began with basic cleansing, washed her face, massaged the muscles. Everything was normal until her eyes opened. Not fully, just a slit, but I saw it. She blinked. I pulled my hand back, took a step away. My heart raced, and for a moment, I heard nothing. No cars outside, no humming vents, just complete silence. Then, the mirror in the prep room shattered. No touch, no reason. It just exploded. I called the supervisor. He tried to explain it away. Condensation, some thermal stress. These things happen, but they don't. In 7 years working there, I'd never seen that before. Still, I kept going. It was my job. That night, I went home with a knot in my stomach. Felt nauseous on the way, even though I hadn't eaten all day. And at home, things began to unravel. First, the mirrors. In the bathroom, mine was fogged up, but I hadn't taken a shower. A smear appeared, like dirty fingers had dragged across the glass. 3 vertical lines, as if someone was watching from inside. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was stress, exhaustion, but the next morning the hallway mirror was shattered, from the inside out, and the strangest thing? There was smeared foundation on the carpet. I went back to the funeral home, finished the preparation. Even though the lights flickered every time I touched her face, I used neutral tones, a dark wine lipstick, nothing flashy. But when I was done, something was off. Her skin was still moist. I dry it and seconds later, it shimmered again. I touched it with the back of my hand. It wasn't sweat. Felt like a tear. In the file, it said her suicide note included one line, "No point covering what was never healed." I went home shaking, but that day, she came with me. At 3:21 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. The bedroom light turned on by itself. My phone fell off the nightstand, and my reflection didn't follow me, turned its head first. I called a friend who's a spiritualist. She came over, burned incense, said prayers. Then she told me, there's a bond, still active. She saw herself in you, and she wants you to see what she saw before she died. That night, I dreamed of the motel room, the covered mirror, and Natalie sitting, staring at her reflection, surrounded by shadows. She looked at me and said, "You saw me, now show them." I woke up with makeup on my face, foundation, concealer, mascara, but I hadn't touched a thing. From that day on, every time I put makeup on someone, I feel hands over mine. And every time I zipped up a dress or applied lipstick, I'd see Natalie in the mirror, always behind me, always watching. It got to the point where I avoided mirrors altogether, covered them all. But even in the sink water, she'd appear. In the steam of the shower, in the microwave door, she was in every reflection. The final straw came at the wake. Her body was there, perfect. The family, who had been missing the whole time, showed up last minute. An elderly woman, a grandmother or aunt maybe, approached the casket, looked at Natalie, and broke down. She came back, but not like this. I quietly approached and asked what she meant. She looked at me with the saddest eyes I've ever seen and said, she saw too much of herself in others. And when you stare too long into your reflection, eventually, the reflection starts looking back. I never did another body again, left the profession, moved far from the city. But even now, at 3:21 a.m., the bedroom light turns on, and the mirror fogs up, even when no one's been inside. And when someone asks if I missed the job, I say, some faces, yes, but one, I never got to say goodbye to. Story 3. The Wrong Face. My name is Ethan Reynolds. I'm a forensic reconstruction specialist. I rebuild faces disfigured by accidents or violence. It's a job that demands precision, patience, and above all, emotional distance. I used to think I was good at that, until that body arrived. It was February 2016. Snow-blanketed Chicago. The entire city was gray, frozen in silence. We received a body that had been hit by a car and dragged for nearly half a mile. The face? Non-existent, just exposed muscle and shattered bone. The file read, male, age 34, no ID, found near South Lake Shore. My job was simple. Reconstruct the face for possible identification by the family. It was a procedure I had done dozens of times. But this one wouldn't let me work in peace. From the very first moment, the air in the room felt heavy. The temperature was normal, but I was shivering. My hands were sweating inside the gloves. The overhead light flickered constantly, and the radio, always on low in the background, kept turning off and on by itself. I ignored it, figured I was just tired. But on the second day, everything started to fall apart. Using bone structure estimates, I selected reference photos. I began the facial sculpting with forensic clay, followed every guideline, eye spacing, jaw proportions, nasal symmetry. By the end of day 3, I had a face, and that's when the nightmare began. That night, I dreamed of the body, It was standing in the corner of the room. But the face was different. Not the one I had rebuilt. "That's not me," he said. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding. But I pushed through, returned to work. The next day, while adjusting the shape of the lips, a section of clay fell off on its own. I broke protocol and checked the room's security footage. Played it in real time. Nothing happened. But in slow motion, I saw it clearly. The clay contracted, as if rejecting the face I'd created. I started over, carefully, but every time I sculpted, the image would shift on its own. I take a photo of the progress. Then minutes later, when I looked at the monitor, the eyes were wider, the nose thinner, the mouth smiling, but not a human smile. It was taunting. I went home exhausted, and that night things got worse. The bathroom mirror was fogged up, even without steam. I wrote with my finger, "Who are you?" A few minutes later, I returned. There was an answer. "You know." I woke up with my face throbbing, went to the bathroom, and for a split second, staring into the mirror. It wasn't my face. It was the one I had reconstructed, but alive and smiling. The next day, I went to the morgue, ready to shut it all down. But when I entered the room, the face on the body had changed. No one had touched it. The jawline was wider, the brows more arched. It was like it was sculpting itself from within. I started digging deeper, requested dental and fingerprint comparisons. None matched. Not previous records, not estimated profiles. It was like that body had never existed. I looked into similar cases. Found a news story from 1997. Unidentified man buried without a face after similar accident. The photo was black and white, but when I zoomed in, what little remained matched the face I had sculpted. I started asking myself, what if he never had a face? What if what I was trying to create was waking something up? That night, I woke up with scratches on my chest. 3 long, parallel marks, like someone tried to open my skin. And on the bedroom wall, written in clay, "This isn't my skin." The next day, I requested leave. I couldn't enter that room again, but the body vanished. The funeral home said the family claimed it. What family? There was no name, no ID, no file. I demanded to see the paperwork. Everything was blank. Files deleted. But in the system, one final access under my name. Date and time, 3:33 a.m. But I wasn't there. Since then, my life's unraveled. Mirrors crack by themselves. The AC blasts cold air at full power, even in the dead of winter. And the photos on my phone sometimes change. Selfies where my face looks slightly off, as if something is trying to reshape me. I went to a spiritual phenomena expert, showed her the photos, told her everything. She held my hand and said, "You gave form to someone who didn't want to be remembered. Now he's using you to exist." I asked, "What do I do?" "Either you face him, or one day, you'll be the next face no one recognizes." Now I live in isolation, far from the city. I haven't touched clay since, not even large mirrors. But I still feel it. Sometimes, when I catch a glimpse of my reflection, the face blinks, not my eyes. His story 4. The body that wouldn't stop. My name is Marcus Lee. I've been an embalmer for over 15 years. I've seen it all. Mangled bodies, forgotten bodies, even some that arrived with messages carved into the skin. But none ever marked me like the one that came during the winter of 2019. It was January. An ice storm had hit Vermont hard. The funeral home I worked at lost power for 2 hours that morning. When I returned from my break, there was a new body in the cold room. Female, early 30s, died in a house fire, but no signs of burns. Apparently, she died from smoke inhalation. I was called in to begin the embalming. So far, just routine. But as I approached the body, I felt heat. Yes, heat. I touched her arm. It was warm. Checked the chamber's thermometer. It was fine. 39 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius. Still, her skin was sweating. Liquid trickled down her forehead. Her lips had what looked like moisture from breath condensation. I froze for a moment, trying to make sense of it. But the death certificate said, confirmed deceased, signed by a doctor. I went back to work, started the external cleansing. But every time I wiped the sweat away, came back, as if her body was fighting to stay warm. I called the funeral director. Could be tissue reaction. Happens more often than people think. But I knew this wasn't normal. I prepped my tools, made the incision for the arterial fluid. That's when the body shuddered. Not a twitch, a full body tremor, like a sudden jolt of electricity. The tray fell, bottles rolled across the floor, and the silence was broken by a soft sound, a sigh. It didn't come from the vents. It didn't come from the pipes. It came from her. I froze, and then something worse. My name appeared on her chest. Marcus, written in sweat, like someone had traced it with a wet finger. I dropped everything and left the room, locked the door, tried to breathe. My hands were shaking. In my mind, I kept repeating, she's alive. This isn't possible. But she's alive. I came back with another staff member, Tom. When we opened the door, the body was dry. The name was gone, but something had changed. Her eyes were slightly open. Tom didn't notice, said it was a trick of the light, an illusion. But I knew what I saw. That night, I dreamed of her. She was lying in a dark bed, staring straight at me, unblinking, but crying. Tears that sizzled against her skin like acid. You see me, Marcus, but you don't hear me. I woke up soaked in sweat. My skin burned, and there was a red mark across my chest. Letters, M-A-R. I went to the police station, asked for more information about the fire. The officer hesitated, but when I mentioned the victim's name, she frowned. The body hasn't been identified. We haven't found any relatives. And the house where she supposedly died doesn't exist in the system anymore. What do you mean? The house where she died? Demolished 2 days before the fire. I was speechless. So, she died in a place that no longer existed? Apparently, yes. I returned to the funeral home, determined never to touch that body again. But the director insisted. We have to finish the process. The funeral is tomorrow. I entered the room, alone, and for the first time, I heard knocking. 3 soft taps, slow, steady, like someone was knocking from inside the metal table. I leaned closer, placed my hand on her chest. There was a pulse, faint but there. I grabbed a stethoscope, placed it over her heart. 2 beats, silence, 2 more. She wasn't alive, but she wasn't dead either. At least not in the usual sense. I closed my eyes, whispered a prayer, and for the first time I felt something I still can't explain. She breathed, not her body, the presence, as if something inside her had pulled in the air around me. I ran, but just before I left, I turned back, and in that moment, her eyes opened. No emotion, no blink, just fixed, locked on mine. I resigned, quit the profession days later, but the nightmares didn't stop. The most frequent one is always the same. I'm in the funeral home. The room is dark, the metal table in the center, and when I lift the sheet, it's me lying there, but with her face. And beside the table, she's watching. No body, just presence, but hot, smothering, impossible to ignore. I went to an old church in the area. The priest listened quietly. You embalmed something that was still between worlds, and now you carry the weight. How do I get rid of it? You don't. You wait, because when the time comes, she'll want you to finish what you started. Today I live far away. I never worked with the dead again, but every Friday, at 3:33 a.m., I hear my name whispered in empty rooms, and the air turns warm, warm like that day, as if she's still trying to escape, using my breath to do it. Story 5. The Marked Body. My name is Samuel Rhodes. I'm an embalmer at a funeral home near the Texas-New Mexico border. I've dealt with just about everything, but never did I think one body could change the way I see the spiritual world. This is the story of the man who refused to be buried. It was late October. Nights were beginning to cool, even in the desert. We received the body of a man who had died under strange circumstances. Police report, cause of death, undetermined. No signs of violence. But what came next was even stranger. The body was covered in markings, circular symbols. Some looked tribal, some resembled runes, others were completely indecipherable. And they were everywhere: neck, chest, arms, back, even the soles of his feet. These weren't tattoos. They were branded into the flesh, like they'd been seared in with a hot iron, but done with precision. There was no name. Police called him John Doe. No ID. Found naked, lying in the middle of an abandoned field. When the officers arrived, he was face down, arms spread wide like a crucifix, and his expression was peaceful. Peaceful, but not for long. I was assigned to prepare the body. Entered the room alone as always. But even before I opened the black bag, I smelled sulfur. Thought maybe it was expired chemicals. But all the bottles were sealed. The room was clean. The smell was coming from him. When I unzipped the bag, my eyes didn't want to believe what they saw. The symbols were glowing, not with light, but with heat. They looked freshly branded. I ran a gloved hand over one. The skin was still warm. My fingers turned red, like I'd touched a hot pan. I tried to rationalize it. Thermal shock? But none of it made sense. I kept going. Cleansing. Drainage. But the moment I inserted the needle into his jugular, the body moved. Subtle. Just a twitch in the left shoulder. But enough to make me drop my tool. I backed into the corner. Tried to breathe. The air felt thick, as if something was pushing me out. But I steadied myself. Returned. Halfway through the procedure, the radio turned on by itself. It wasn't plugged in. And yet, it played. A strange recording. Voices in Latin. Words I couldn't understand. I tried to turn it off. The button didn't work. Then the metal table shook. The body arched. Slightly, like it was waking up. I left the room. Went straight to the funeral director. He came in with me, but when he saw the body, he didn't speak. Just went pale. You need to finish this. Quickly. This sort of thing has happened before. What do you mean? Some bodies don't want to rest, and others just want to come back. I went back in, and that night, the body opened, not from cuts, but from the symbols. One by one, they began to bleed. Small drops, bright red, alive. And the most disturbing part? The symbols were multiplying. On his skin, on the metal table, on the walls, as if they were copying themselves. I rushed to wash my hands. And in the bathroom mirror, my face was marked. The same runes, drawn in steam. I left without looking back. But the worst came during the funeral. The family arrived, or rather 3 people in black. No emotion, no grief. They just stared at the body, cleaned, dressed, laid in the coffin. And one of them said, "He shouldn't be here." "What do you mean?" I asked. "He was sealed, but you broke it by touching him, by trying to bury him." Who was he? It doesn't matter who he was, but what he holds. He's a vessel. And now, so are you. That night I got a fever, hallucinations, voices in ancient tongues, and finally, a dream. The body rose from the coffin, walked to my bed, and lay down beside me. "Thank you, Samuel. Now we are one." I woke up with blood on my pillow. The same symbols were forming on my arm. I went to the hospital. They called it chemical burns, but I hadn't touched anything chemical. I was admitted, stayed under observation for 2 days, and on the second day, I received a letter. No return address. Inside, a sheet of old paper, handwritten. "Where you touch, he touches. Where you see, he sees. What you hear, he whispers. And when you go, he returns." Now I live with the marks, covered, hidden. But every night, at 3:33 a.m., I hear his voice, saying it's almost time, that I'm nearly ready. I've never touched another body since. But they say that coffin, even sealed, still moves in the mausoleum. That in the dead of night the cameras shut off, and the symbols come back, on their own. Some dead want peace, others want justice, but some just want to start again. Inside someone else, inside you. You made it this far, or rather, someone brought you here. These 5 stories weren't just coincidences, morbid accidents, or the hallucinations of people who work with the dead. They were warnings about what happens when silence isn't respected, about what lies beneath the skin, about memories that don't die, bodies that don't forget, and souls that still have something to say. If any of these stories stirred something in you, if an image stayed in your mind, if a strange feeling still lingers as you hear my voice now, don't keep it to yourself. Comment, share, tell your story, because what these presences want most is for you to stay silent, to let the secret die with you. Don't let it. Click like, ring the bell, and if you still have the courage, subscribe to the channel. Here death has a voice, and we are only the messengers. But be careful, those who listen until the end always take something with them,